Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Stranger Things Season 4 Part 2. Let's talk about it. So first of all, before we get started, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you check out my review of Stranger Things Season 4 Part 1, which I did about a month ago when that part came out, and you'll get a better understanding of my thoughts and feelings on Season 4 overall, because like 75% of the season dropped last month. But today for this video, we're mostly going to be focusing on the second part, you know, the 2 episodes that were released on Friday, as well as I'm giving you guys my thoughts on the season overall and how it fits in with the rest of the Stranger Things series. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Stranger Things Season 4 Part 2. So first of all, before we even get started, I have to give a massive round of applause to the Stranger Things gang, the cast and the crew, because oh my goodness. Just a few weeks back, I made a video talking about the worst and the best and the meh of 2022 so far. And I mentioned how because there are so many TV shows coming out these days, it's tough to even get super excited about anything anymore. You know, a lot of the TV shows that we see are, you know, pretty good or very good, but they don't blow our minds. But here we have Stranger Things coming in with a 4th season, not a first, not a second, not a third, a 4th season, a 4th season, guys, and they just knocked it out of the park. They reminded us what it means to put everything into one season of television, giving the fans everything that they wanted and things that they didn't even know to ask for, and truly just blowing our minds and becoming a cultural phenomenon for the 4th season. Already we knew that Stranger Things had a moment a few years back when it first debuted. We already knew that Stranger Things had a whole moment. It literally changed the culture. It spearheaded this like 80s renaissance that we're seeing still to this day. So it already had its time. But it's so unusual for a show to come back on its 4th season and do it all again. Bring us back to that, you know, first season of Stranger Things when it was a cultural phenomenon, and giving us even more, you know, having people obsessed over Kate Bush. This season has been a moment. It has had a moment in the spotlight that has lasted the entire month leading up to the second part of the show, and all I can say is bravo. All I can say is bravo, hats off to you, round of applause, you did the thing. And to me, it's even more surprising and also exciting because I only watched Stranger Things for the first time this year. I binge watched the entire series a month ago leading up to the release of Season 4 because first of all, I thought that Season 4 would be the final season. We'll talk about that later on, okay? But I thought Season 4 would be the last one. And secondly, I thought, you know what, it's time. Like, I've been avoiding this for some reason. I don't know why it took me so long, but it's time to finally watch this damn show that people love so much. And I fell in love with it as well. And I feel like it was the perfect time to jump on this bandwagon because, you know, there could have been a risk that Season 4 would have bombed and I would have binge watched the entire series for no reason. Like, that was a risk, but it turns out that Season 4 ended up being one of the very best seasons of the entire show. So honestly, there couldn't have been a better way for me to be introduced to this series, to have all 3 seasons fresh on my mind and then go into Season 4 and just have my mind blown once again. Okay, so finally, let's go into what happened in the second part of Season 4. First thing to note was the runtime. The runtime was killer. It took me the whole day to watch 2 episodes of Stranger Things. Why? Because each episode was a feature-length film in its own right. Okay, especially with the second episode, episode 9, literally was what, 2.5 hours? That was crazy. But I do think it was worth it, especially because of the exceptional storytelling. What I will say about Season 4 is that everything came together so beautifully. You already know by now, after watching 3 seasons of Stranger Things, that the 4th season is going to include some kind of monster from the upside down. Like, we already know this, okay? We've seen it, we've been there, we've done that, we bought the t-shirt. But the key element of Stranger Things that really makes it special, really has fans coming back season after season, is how they are going to tell this new monster's story. How are they going to portray the monster? How are they going to realize it? And in this season, we had the introduction of a brand new monster called Vecna, who's this demonic entity. He's this demonic entity. And in the first part of season 4, it was revealed that Vecna is not just some detached demon from another realm, but in actuality, he is number 1. He is of the same brood as 11, and he was actually the first one to be experimented by Papa. And so he turned into this monster after 11 shoved him in the upside down, trying to get rid of him. But in the meantime, she also opened up a portal, a gateway to the upside down, which we see has dire consequences at the end of season 4 here. But in terms of Vecna himself, I think he was a spectacular villain for season 4, and I think that's one of the reasons why season 4 stands out so much, because the key difference is that, first of all, just aesthetically, he looks very, very different to all of the other monsters that have been introduced in Stranger Things previously. And even though it's all coming together with the Demogorgons and that big monster spider thing and, you know, Vecna, they're all coming together really cohesively. But at the same time, it does pay to have all of these different monsters from the upside down look distinct and feel distinct, so that each season feels unique in its own way. Now, of course, materializing Vecna cost the team a ton of money, and it was actually revealed that the main reason why they had to wait for the last 2 episodes to drop on Netflix is because of the special effects. They really pumped a ton of money into this season. I mentioned in my review of part 1 that the average cost per episode for season 4 of Stranger Things was $30 million. $30 million. Like, Netflix was just making it rain on the Stranger Things set. Like, honestly, $30 million was spent per episode. Now, that's just an average, but I do suspect that obviously we have episode 9, which was 2 and a bit hours long, plus it was very heavily special effects based, so I figured that that would have cost even more than 30 million. Like, that would have increased the average overall. So yeah, this was an incredibly expensive endeavor, but it really helped materialize this villain. It really allowed him to feel real, to feel tangible. Each and every vine that was like crawling up his neck and his body, it just felt real, and it made him very visually striking. And as a result, I feel like I said, it really helps him stand out in the Stranger Things mythos. So yeah, it was definitely money well spent. But of course, we didn't just have special effects materialize the character of Vecna. We also have to give props to the actor underneath all of the special effects and the makeup and the prosthetics, and that was Jamie Campbell-Bower, who also portrayed number 1 earlier in this season. I think he did a spectacular job. The movements of this character, the menace in his voice, the fact that he was very restricted in his, you know, facial movements. He couldn't really convey much through his eyes and his face, but he was able to do so through his body language and also through his voice. I think it was really, really impressive, especially during the more intimate personal moments that he had with the characters. Which brings me to the next reason why Vecna was such an effective villain this season, and it's because he had such personal ties with these characters. He wasn't just, you know, an ethereal, you know, extraterrestrial character that didn't really speak, that didn't really communicate effectively with our protagonist. He was a character who was able to speak directly to our protagonist. He was a character who was able to look them in the eyes, see their greatest fears and flaws, and attack them directly. And that's something that we haven't seen yet in Stranger Things. You know, previously with, you know, the monsters of the Upside Down, they tend to communicate using other people's bodies, possessing them in some way. So there's no real direct line of communication between the monster and our protagonist. But this time around, we had scenes with Vecna standing mere centimeters away from Elle or from Max, and that was just terrifying, especially considering, like I said, how well realized he is. Honestly, it just made it so much more intimidating to see. And then of course the final reason why Vecna was such an effective villain this season was because of the writing. You know, obviously we have a backstory this time around, again, that is more personal than the other monsters that we've seen on the series, because Vecna used to be number one. He knows what 11 went through. In fact, he went through worse, and because Papa was so intent on creating this like perfect being that had so much power and everything, he was tortured. He went through hell, and that created a monster in him that ultimately festered in the Upside Down and became even worse. But here we have a villain that Elle has a direct relationship with, and someone that she thought she could trust when she was younger, and that betrayal hurt her so much to the point where she actually repressed that memory because she couldn't deal with, you know, what had happened and the consequences of it. So this season is all about resurfacing that memory, obviously in the story, but I'm guessing, you know, with the writer's room coming up with this story, they had to think of something. But this season was about repressing that memory that definitely existed in season 1, I think. And I do think it made for a really great character-driven story for both Vecna and 11. Now, before we get into Elle and the crew, we need to talk about what happened at the end of season 4. You know, what Vecna did and how it's going to affect Hawkins as a whole, because it seems like we've ended with the apocalypse. We've actually ended with the apocalypse. And you know what? I appreciate this. I appreciate the fact that finally we are starting to see real life consequences that are going to affect not just our favorite gang, but, you know, the world at large. I really like how the stakes were increased this season, and we actually got a payoff to it at the end there when we saw earthquakes, literally the apocalypse. Like literally we saw the Upside Down seeping into the real world, killing off flowers, you know, in its wrath. And I do think that this is going to make for a really interesting season 5, a great setup for season 5. But at the same time, I do think, you know, if season 5 wasn't already confirmed, and if Stranger Things wasn't the most successful show on the entirety of Netflix's platform, I would say that season 4 had a good enough ending that that could be the end of the series. I don't want it to be. I do want to find out what's going to happen afterwards. But I will say, you know, considering how well they did for season 4, how they really put their foot in it, they really put their all into season 4, it wouldn't shock me, you know, it wouldn't, you know, overly upset me if this was the final season of the show. Again, it's not going to be. They do have a season 5 on the way, but I do think it works very effectively as an end to the series overall. But assuming that this isn't the end of Stranger Things, I am really excited to see how the secret world, you know, all of these secrets that Elle and the gang have had to keep for the last 4 seasons, finally seeping into the real world. I'm so excited to see how it's going to have, you know, a greater effect, a wider effect on the world in this show, because like I said, I love the fact that the stakes were increased, and I love the fact that we got that payoff, and hopefully season 5 follows suit. And just as a side note, I have to say that I found myself smiling at the apocalypse. I found myself smiling and kind of giggling at the apocalypse that took place in Hawkins, because I have been saying since I started watching this show a month ago that Hawkins needs to just go. Hawkins, I'm so sorry. I'm talking about Hawkins in Stranger Things. Okay, I don't know if it's a real town, calm down. But Hawkins in Stranger Things needs to just be like robbed off the map. I'm so sorry. I've been saying this since season 1, you know, maybe since season 2. Season 1, I gave Hawkins a chance, but after season 2, I was like, yeah, it might be time to it might be time to forget about Hawkins, because this town is doomed. Like, this town is actually doomed. Like, all these monsters, this whole Upside Down, all happening in this one town in Indiana. I think that's crazy. I think we need to give up on that one. Yep, I think everyone needs to be relocated. And then when I saw the apocalypse at the end of season 4, I was like, what did I tell you guys? We should have just wrapped it up. We should have just gotten everyone packing their bags ages ago and left this town behind, because now look what's happening. There's no way to get rid of they're like weeds that never go away, the Upside Down, and now it's just seeping in and destroying the entire garden. So, you know, Hawkins is doomed, and like I said, it should have just been wiped off of the map ages ago. Okay, so next up, let's get into the characters. Now, I already broke down my thoughts on each of the different character arcs and storylines with these characters in my part 1 video, so you can go ahead and check that out if you want a bit more detail and depth. But here, all around, I would just say that We know that the cast for Stranger Things is beloved. We know that this cast is so incredibly talented. They are able to bring to life these like Spielbergian characters in the modern day, you know, having that kind of wholesome, lovable feel to them. But at the same time, when it comes to the Stranger Things gang, they're able to also sell danger. They are able to sell danger so well. I think this is something that is even better than a lot of Spielberg films from the 80s. The stakes are so high and they are able to sell it each and every time. And they're also able to sell just the friendship and the love and the care that they have between them, which also increases the stakes when one of them is targeted by an evil demon, for instance. Because you buy their relationships, because you buy their friendships, you feel for them when they're going through hell like they do in this season. And I just think that that speaks volumes about the cast's chemistry. The on-screen chemistry has always been known to be superb, even from season 1 when they were so young, but now they are much older, okay, and I still think they sell that chemistry on screen. Even with brand new characters, you know, they have enough on-screen chemistry among them that they can just bring in brand new characters and they feel like they're at home with the cast as well. So yeah, of course, the Stranger Things cast has always been a blessing to this series, but I will say, you know, as much as we love these characters and the actors who portray them, I do think at this point, we may need to trim the fat, okay? I'm so sorry. We may need to trim the fat. We may need to start cutting down on the number of characters that we have on this show because there's too many. I'm so sorry. There's too many characters and they can't all be done justice. That's the thing, you know, it's all well and good introducing brand new characters that people love and really connect to, but if you can't do them justice story-wise, then you may as well just, you know, omit them from the story overall, or not introduce any new characters until you've done the existing characters justice, because I do think that there are some superfluous characters here, and whilst I love them, whilst I enjoy them, they don't need to be here, strictly speaking. The main character in my mind that falls under this category, I'm so sorry, but it's Robin. I'm so sorry. Like, I like Robin, okay, and I especially love her friendship with Steve. Oh, I love that stuff, absolutely, but she is kind of superfluous this season. Like, I'm sorry, we didn't really need her this season. Another character would be Erica, but listen, technically speaking, Erica is not strictly necessary, but I would be damned if they got rid of that character. Absolutely not, over my dead body. First of all, of course, I'm never going to advocate for them getting rid of a black female character on the show. Like, I'm never going to do that. But secondly, I do think that she is a character that is used sparingly but effectively. So even though she's not strictly necessary on the Stranger Things cast list, she is an added bonus that I think is quite welcome. Now, a lot of you guys will feel the same way about Robin, but the problem with Robin is that she is supposed to be a part of that inner circle, but her storylines don't really suggest that. Her storylines are kind of lacking, are kind of two-dimensional. I feel like they don't really know what to do with this character at this point, and so she feels superfluous to the story. The next two for me in the unnecessary pile would be Jonathan and his stoner friend. Now, Jonathan has to be in the show because he's Will's brother, so like, he has to be there, right? But his stoner friend, I don't know why they introduced him this season. I'm so sorry. He had moments, especially like when he proved himself to be useful and actually ended up providing a sensory deprivation chamber for 11, fine. But that didn't necessarily have to be him. If we're being real, like, that could have been Jonathan. He could have known somewhere where 11 could have done her special magic powers. So like, it didn't have to be his stoner friend. He had some quirky, fun moments, but overall, I would say that he was an unnecessary addition to this already quite bloated cast. Now, the next two, I wouldn't say were unnecessary to this cast because they are part of the original cast, but I would say that their story wasn't the strongest this season around, and that would be Will and Max. Let's start off with Will for a second here. I don't know if I mentioned this in my review of part 1, but I'm pretty sure Will has feelings towards Max, right? Like, I'm not the only one getting the gay vibes. Like, I'm not the only one getting unrequited love from Will's eyes, right? I think that's where they're going with the character, and hopefully they fulfill that in a meaningful way in season 5, because otherwise it's just bad writing in my opinion. Wish we could do more with the character of Will than just having him be in the closet and like mooning over Max, who's like a mid character in my opinion. But hopefully they'll do more with the character of Will, and hopefully he'll be happy by the end of Stranger Things, because I do think he deserves it. He went through so much trauma, this poor boy, in the first few seasons of the show, so he deserves better, okay? And he certainly deserves better than that haircut. He certainly deserves better than that haircut. And I know that the hairstylist for this season did say that the bias haircuts was intentionally bad, because the idea is that Joyce kind of did their hair like in the kitchen with the kitchen scissors. So she just like chopped off the hair and it looks ridiculous and awful. But man, like Will's haircut is just like the worst, the worst of the bunch, okay? So for my boy to be having to endure this suffering, this pain, he needs to have a fulfilling story arc at the end when all is said and done. And then we move on to Mike, who I feel like is floundering at this point, you know? And they even make a point to address it in the season. Like, that's part of his story. The idea that you have this character of Elle who drops on his lap, figuratively speaking, and she is so powerful. She's like Superman amongst mortals. He's kind of lost in, you know, what his role is with this story. And I feel like that's kind of a commentary on the writing of the character as well, because what do you do with the character of Mike? You know, there's this feeling that the second that Elle becomes more independent and more self-sufficient, she'll no longer need Mike. And so what becomes of this character? Can he stand on his own without his association with Elle? And this season failed to really answer that question in a satisfying way, because in the end, you know, Will makes this comment about Mike being the heart of the group or something, but you don't really feel that this season, especially when the group is, you know, split in half and they're, you know, far away from each other for the majority of the runtime. So you don't really get the sense that Mike is the heart of the group. Obviously in seasons past he was more integral, especially because of his connection to Elle, but now I feel like Mike is struggling with his identity a little bit, and I feel like the writers are struggling with his identity as well. And so I do think that his storyline was one of the weakest this season round. Hopefully they'll find a way to make him more relevant and important in season 5. Okay, so the next group up would be Nancy and Steve. They're definitely relevant. Yep. They're definitely relevant. We've moved up somewhat from the other gang, but Nancy and Steve are a delight. Obviously, when we were first introduced to the character of Steve, he was scum. He was scum. He was a literal bully. He was the worst. But now he has just transformed as a character. I think Steve has had one of the most effective, transformative character arcs in all of Stranger Things. In all of television. In all of television, okay? Like, he is just truly a different person, and we love to see it. We love Steve. He's one of our favorites, okay? So I am actually quite happy to see Steve and Nancy just mingling a little bit. Obviously, I feel bad for Jonathan. Like, I do like the character of Jonathan, but he's a bit stale these days. Like, he's not giving what needs to be gave. So Nancy's, you know, turning her head towards Steve, who's a literal hero. It's a literal, like, he is out here jumping into the upside down, you know, no questions asked. He's doing what needs to be done, and that's what we need to see. That's what we need for someone like Nancy, who's also as precocious. But yeah, I like them together now. Yep. And I think it is a well-deserved turn in their relationship. I will say though, the way that they were talking to each other this season, it made me feel like Steve was gonna die. Like, am I the only one who thought for a horrible second that Steve was gonna die? Because he had that heroic moment where he jumped after Nancy and he was really taking care of her. And he was also talking about like, oh, I had this vision where, you know, I would have a bunch of kids and I would be happy with his family. And then he reveals that he always imagined it with Nancy. So like, all of this talk made me feel like Steve wasn't gonna make it, you know what I mean? And I was actually surprised when it ended up being Eddie who dies, but I think it would have been a fitting character arc for Steve as well. But I don't want him to die, so I'm glad they didn't go down that route, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kept it for season 5, because someone significant has to die on this show for it to matter. A side note though, since I did mention Eddie, I will quickly say that he was a cool addition to the cast, and his sacrifice did resonate with with me. Like, I feel like it was an emotionally impactful moment. I don't think we had enough time with the character for him to be like a proper, you know, favorite character. But yeah, I think it was a really cute arc that he had there. And also, one of you guys pointed out in my review of part 1 that the whole fiasco around Dungeons and Dragons and people thinking that Eddie was the head of a cult and everything actually mirrored real life events back in the 80s, where there was this genuine fear of like cults and, you know, Satan worshippers and perhaps their association with, you know, playing D&D. Like, it was a whole thing. So I think that's really interesting, the fact that they made this character emblematic of that movement from the 80s, and also just makes it so much sadder then that he ended up sacrificing himself, you know, refusing to run away this time, but now his legacy and, you know, what he did is being marred by the continual rhetoric that he was part of a cult that, you know, worships Satan. And also, side note, since we're talking about Eddie, Jason, the head of the basketball team, that jock character who was really upset about his girlfriend dying to the point where he would become homicidal. Yeah, he sucks. Jason, oh my god, during his fight with Lucas, I got so angry. I was like, are you serious right now, Jason? Do you not see that you are in hell? Do you not see that you are in a demon's domain and you are arguing with Lucas? You're fighting with Lucas. Like, what kind of nonsense is it? I hated Jason so much. Again, going back to what I said about, you know, the historical context, I think it's relevant, but man, did I hate the character of Jason. Oh, I hated the character. When he grabbed the gun and pointed it at Lucas and he was like, wake Max up. I'm like, do you understand what's going on? You are in literal hell. Like, you are literally in hell right now and you're asking to wake up someone who's clearly been possessed somehow. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Okay, so next up we need to get into the adults. Yes, you know, in part 1 we did see the adults take a trip to the USSR. That was really fun. We saw Jim, who was alive. Yes, of course. You can't kill off Jim, please. You can't kill off Jim Hopper, okay? So I was so happy to see that he was alive and he was put through hell in a Siberian gulag. Oh, we hate to see it. We absolutely hate to see it. We saw his reunion with Joyce, which was really touching. And in part 2, we finally get to dispense of the, you know, the ambiguity surrounding their relationship because they did share a kiss. I whooped. I literally was like, yes. I can't wait for the day where the Byers and the Hoppers are officially united in one big, dysfunctional, traumatized family. And speaking of the adult crew, we also had the introduction of a new character, Dimitri, who was the prison guard turned friend of Jim. And he was portrayed by the guy from Game of Thrones. The guy, Tom something. I can't pronounce his second name, so I'll put it here. I thought he was a great addition to the cast. And I feel like also because the adult gang are so much smaller, so there's fewer characters there, he had more time to shine. Whereas when it comes to the younger crew, because there are so many of them, they're really fighting for screen time. And even though they're all beloved and all, you know, perfectly portrayed, there's only so much time in the show, even in a show that has a 2-hour episode. And also another person that sucked this season would have to be Yuri. Yuri absolutely sucks. Okay, it goes Vecna, then it goes Jason, and then it goes Yuri. Oh, actually no, Papa's in there as well, of course, as he always is, because he sucks. But yeah, Yuri was also the worst, and the fact that he made everyone wait so long to be able to go back to America made me sick. And also the fact that he was keeping Jim away from his daughter Elle also made me sick. It made me so mad. I hated the character of Yuri, but I am glad that ultimately he made the right decision and helped the gang out. And finally, of course, the most useful and essential character on the show is and always has been my girl Elle. And here she was put through hell once again. Like this poor girl, man. I have to say, it's so upsetting that she has to suffer so much, but this season really revealed a lot about her backstory, a lot about what she went through in that horrible hellscape of a laboratory, whilst also revealing a lot about her relationship with some of her cohorts and her relationship with Papa, aka Dr. Brenner. At the beginning of the season, we saw 11 go through some horrible bullying, and I know that this was something that Millie Bobby Brown spoke about in real life because she endured endured bullying when she was younger as well. So it was really important for her to portray this, you know, this season, to raise awareness of it. But yeah, it was so heartbreaking to see this character go through such horrible treatment in her school. And I did not shed a single tear when that bullying girl, I don't even remember her name because she's so irrelevant, but that girl who was like the head of the clique ended up with a broken nose. I did not care. I may have even whooped a little bit because I just despised that character. She was another villain in season 4. But the themes of bullying and Elle feeling like an outsider were echoed when she remembered her past and remembered her relationship with her cohorts, where they also started to bully her, when they also started to single her out, and she ended up confiding in one, you know, who she didn't realize was one at the time, but you know, she thought she had a friend in there, only to be betrayed in the most horrible way when she figured out that he actually wanted to destroy everything. He had plans of his own, and she had to take him down, thereby, you know, starting all of this. So I think 11 had a very compelling storyline this season. It started off as being so relatable to so many people who have gone through bullying in the past, to ending up, you know, being just completely extraterrestrial, you know, very existential as well. But at the same time, it's still rooted in her relationship with her friends, you know, as her storylines tend to be. At this time around, highlighting her friendship with Max, because Max was, of course, targeted by Vecna because of the trauma that she suffered in the past, and Elle was on this mission to try and save her. Even though she wasn't physically there this time around, she was able to telepathically connect with Max and breach that sort of telepathic connection that Vecna had made with her. But unfortunately, she had to see Max really suffer first of all, and feel like she had lost Max forever, until ultimately she did end up winning, I guess. The fact that the writers didn't just sit back and coast off of the success of the previous seasons of the show, but actually tried to create, you know, a brand new mythology for this character and develop this relationship with the villain of this story, I think was really, really impressive and really effective. And then finally, even though she is not the most powerful character in the show, she definitely shone this season. We have my sis Max. We have my poor sis Max, who really wasn't herself at the beginning of season 4. She was a shell of her former self. She had distanced herself from the rest of the gang, and she just felt so isolated in her misery. And that was what Vecna used. You know, he used that sorrow, that pain, the mourning, but also the lack of regret that she had within her, that she revealed later, in order to kind of trap her and use her to be one of the gateways to the upside down or whatever. Of course, the telepathic connection between Max and Vecna gave us one of the most iconic moments in television history, with that running up that hill sequence, which people became obsessed with, to the point where, like I said, Kate Bush got a ton of money this month from people streaming the song. I do think overall, when it comes to Max, it wasn't just that moment, you know, it was everything leading up to the moment. It was everything to do with her relationship with her brother Billy, the fact that he sucked as well, and the conflicting feelings that she had about his death. I think it was done really, really well. The payoff, you know, in terms of how Vecna targeted her was clever as hell, and I think it did wonders to enrich this character and make her feel more essential to this, like I said, bloated cast. So guys, like I said at the beginning of this review, hats off to the Stranger Things crew. They did that. They did that, okay? They upped the ante and created one of the best seasons of a show that is already so highly regarded, that it's one of the most successful shows on Netflix's entire platform. Like, they did that in the 4th season, and I think that's something worth applause. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Stranger Things season 4 a 9 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Stranger Things season 4, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.